Aaron Israel with Fundamental Defense in Midland, Texas. I recently wrote an article for Personal Defense Network about church safety and security, and one of the things that I talked about in that article was the role that the armed citizen plays in church security. What the armed citizen's role is in church security is when overt security measures break down, when you're not able to deter the bad guy from coming in, when you're not able to detect him coming through the door. Sometimes the armed citizen is in a place where they can respond where your church security people can't because they're not in the right place at the right time. Not only that, a lot of people only think about the active shooter situation inside of a church. The active shooter situation is actually the least likely thing to happen in a church service. Usually what happens is domestic violence spilling over or some type of targeted attack of one person against another. Now, if you disallow your people in your congregation from carrying concealed, then they're not able to defend themselves if one of those situations spills over and they find themselves as the individual who's targeted. So that's the first problem with disallowing people from carrying concealed. And a lot of people in the comments, though, were talking about this scenario where you have an active shooter situation and you have concealed carry holders in the congregation, and for some reason those concealed carry holders pull out their guns and indiscriminately fire at the bad guy and potentially hurt other people in the congregation because of their lack of training. Now, that's a valid concern, theoretically speaking, but I haven't been able to find any evidence in any active shooter situation at a church or otherwise where armed citizens have indiscriminately opened fire and hurt innocent bystanders. What I have found in my research is quite the contrary. A lot of times people who are armed citizens will pull out their firearms, realize the danger to innocent bystanders, and due to that danger, not take the shot that they might have taken if there weren't innocent bystanders in the way. One of the things that comes to mind is the Oregon Mall shooting. The concealed carrier drew his firearm, saw that he didn't have a shot at the bad guy because of all the innocent bystanders standing around, and he didn't take the shot. But just the fact that he pulled his gun out was enough to make the active shooter turn the gun on himself and ended the spree killing. So there's all kinds of examples like that where armed citizens have made the right decision not to shoot because of the danger to innocent bystanders in the crowd. So I don't think that that fear is really based on any real scientific evidence of that having ever happened. Not only that, it flies in the face of human psychology. It is a very difficult thing to take a shot at another human being regardless, and much less if you think that there's innocent bystanders in the way. So it goes against our very human nature to take shots when we think that innocent people might be harmed because of our negligence. So we have the tendency to not take those shots as opposed to taking them just based on good old human psychology and our unwillingness to kill our fellow man. That's a fact. So I don't think there's any evidence for that fear, but I understand where it comes from. Where the other place that that fear really comes from and what it really stems from is a wrong attitude about training. Yes, people should train if they're going to carry firearms. I'm a professional trainer, so I absolutely agree with that statement that if you're going to carry a firearm in the public space, you should get to a class and you should practice regularly with your firearm. What I do not agree with is that we should put artificial training blocks in between citizens and exercising what is a fundamental human right to personal defense with a firearm. Anytime you mandate training, you're going to create a situation where there's a lowest common denominator training standard. That's exactly what happens in states like mine, in the state of Texas, where we have this artificial concealed carry training standard that really isn't training at all. All you're doing is putting holes in a paper target and getting a score at the end. It doesn't teach you how to use your firearm in anything close to the context where you might actually need to employ it in a worst case scenario. And the fact of the matter is that when you mandate training, you may or may not be mandating something that's really worthwhile. And once you set that mandate in place, it becomes doctrine. And doctrine does not evolve. So as we learn new things about how to deal with active shooters, as we learn better ways to employ our handguns defensively, that doctrine is going to be stuck 20 years behind, just like we see in the military and in law enforcement. So training mandates and doctrine are bad things, and that's the results of when you set these artificial standards for you have to meet XYZ standard before you can carry your concealed firearm. The right attitude about training is that if you've been to a class and you've taken your responsibility seriously and you've gone and gotten that extra training, maybe you're a part of the church security team, maybe you have gone through that level 4 or whatever security license class, and you've also taken classes on how to respond to an active shooter, you've been to that good reality-based force-on-force simulation training, and you've done all those things. Well, if that's the case, you should encourage people who you know carry guns to come to those classes with you. You should tell them about how great those training opportunities are, what a great value they are, what a great way to spend your money and your time and your resources they are, and convince them to go and take those training classes as well. That's the best way to approach training, is to be an evangelist for that training. Not to say you must do this or you can't exercise your right, but to say, hey, you have rights, and with those rights come responsibility. Let me tell you about that awesome class that I took that taught me how to respond to an active shooter situation when there's innocent bystanders. Let me tell you about that class that I took that taught me how to shoot when I'm dealing with a crowd that I have to move through. If you've been to these classes, encourage people that you know carry guns to go and take these classes with you. And that's the right attitude about training, not putting blocks in between them and their rights. And let's not forget that personal defense with a firearm is a fundamental human right. It's so important that we encoded it in our Constitution with the Second Amendment. That's the whole purpose behind the Second Amendment, is to prevent that right from being infringed upon. That being said, you do not allow or disallow rights in your church. What you do is you either choose to infringe on people's rights or you choose to not infringe on people's rights. And make no mistake about it, if you are a church that prevents legal concealed carry when it is otherwise legal in your state because of some artificial understanding of training, like I mentioned before, you are in fact infringing on the rights of your congregation, and you do not support gun rights. You cannot say you support gun rights out of one side of your mouth and then say, oh, but only if you take this class out of the other side of your mouth. That is an infringement, okay? So that's my opinion on mandating training and what role the armed citizen plays, not only in the church, but in any open space. Because if you believe in preventing concealed carry in your church congregation, there's no difference between your church congregation and any other part of the public space, whether it be a movie theater, a mall, any place that you can carry inside of a public building where there's potential for crowds. If you have that attitude that you're worried about someone indiscriminately opening fire and therefore they shouldn't be allowed to bring their firearm in, then you don't support concealed carry at all in the public space. And based on that, I guess people should only be allowed to have guns in their home. Is that what you want? Well, if that's your attitude, that's what you're telling me. So I don't think that's really what people believe. I think they have an artificial understanding of what really happens in these worst case scenarios, a bad understanding of human psychology, and that's okay. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know. But do the research, look at these situations, and if you can find an example where someone indiscriminately opened fire and injured an innocent bystander as an armed citizen, I'm happy to look at that example and I'll correct myself. But I've not been able to find any examples of that. So if you disagree with me, hey, head on over to personaldefensenetwork.com, jump on the article, leave me a comment, and we can debate it over there in a polite and professional manner. Or send me an email at fundamentaldefense@gmail.com. I want to hear what you guys have to say about it. If somebody disagrees with me, I'd love to hear why. That being said, like I said, I'm Aaron Israel with fundamentaldefense.com, and find us there on the internet as well as at facebook.com/fundamentaldefense or on Instagram @fundefense. And we hope to see you at a class. And remember, if you've been to a training class, encourage your friends to come. Don't be arrogant about it. Be an evangelist. Go out there and get people to come to training. That's what you should really be doing if you're a responsible armed citizen. Thanks.